guys? Welcome to a brand new installment of Fact You. Here's your good buddy, Uncle Ben. I've got a whole bunch of great guitar-related questions that I'm going to be answering today, but before we do, let's stop in at old Uncle Ben's boombox and see what I've been jamming out to lately. This month I've been hopelessly addicted to the album Meta by Carbomb. The music is super technical and complex, but it doesn't sound too terribly, premeditated or thought out. It's not technical just for the sake of making something hard to play or whatever. It just sounds like it was a whole bunch of pissed off guys in a room and it just came out that way. Also, the production on the records is fantastic and just sounds real, you know what I mean? Which to me is a huge breath of fresh air, where so much stuff in metal right now, especially more technical metal, is just so much, quantized and copied and pasted and, recorded at half speed nonsense. It's a real breath of fresh air to hear somebody like Carbomb come along and do stuff that sounds real. The guitar playing on the record is super sick and creative. He tunes to, I think, drop A flat on a 6-string if I'm not mistaken, but there's so much like whammy pedal and pitch shifting stuff going on throughout the record that I just have no clue what's happening with the guitars 90% of the time. So yeah, I'm absolutely addicted to this record. If you get the chance to see them live anytime around you, definitely go check them out. They're unbelievably perfect in person. They've also got an awesome documentary that they made a few years ago about what it's like being in a independent band with a really extreme kind of esoteric sort of sound. Really awesome and kind of depressing documentary, so be sure to check that out too. It's definitely not for everybody, but it seems like everybody I've showed this album to has just been absolutely floored by it, so definitely go check out Meta by Carbomb. Yeah, let's get on to some questions. My YouTube subscriber Fabiano Pina asks, do you know a series of videos that could teach me the basics? I think that's a great question, because so many guitar teachers on YouTube just focus on intermediate to advanced techniques and shredding and stuff like that. I'm totally guilty as charged there. I haven't really done many at all, good beginner kind of lessons. Let me know if you guys think that I should. Think that'd be a good idea? I think I do. There's also a lot of misinformation and fake news out there in the guitar world, so it's kind of hard to know where to start. But one guy's channel that I would definitely recommend for any beginner is to check out Justin Guitar. Justin has been a part of the online guitar community for a long time now, and he's got over 500,000 subscribers and stuff, so he's pretty well known. His stuff is awesome. He's a really great player. I think that he explains everything beautifully. And over on his channel, he's got stuff that goes from, I just got a guitar, what do I do, all the way up into, higher level kind of jazz and harmony concepts. Even a couple of years ago, I learned a ton of stuff from his channel about altered dominant chords and the altered scale and stuff like that. Really well explained stuff. So I love Justin Guitar's channel. Lots of good stuff for a beginner over there. One of my other absolute favorite channels that I gotta mention is Scott's Bass Lessons. Again, that guy is huge in the community. He's been around for a really long time. You might have seen him. He's the guy that plays bass and usually wears a glove. He's got a nerve condition, and wearing a tight-fitting glove apparently helps calm that down for him. Scott is an incredible bass player. He's so awesome, and he's got a lot of really fantastic lesson stuff on his channel that deals with timing and harmony and scales and chord voicings and stuff like that. I know it's like a bass guitar channel or whatever, but seriously, any guitar player can learn a ton of stuff by browsing through his videos and everything. He's got a lot of really good content, so check out Scott's Bass Lessons as well. Tell him Uncle Ben sent you. Next question is a two-parter from Guitar Anime. He asks, have you tried the Moore preamp? What do you think about it? And the second part of his question is, best streaming platform to watch horror movies. Good stuff. I've never tried the Moore preamp, so I cannot comment on that, although I've heard Moore makes really good stuff. I'd like to try some out sometime. As for the best streaming platform to watch horror movies, Shudder is freaking awesome. You can get that on any of your streaming devices, laptop, your phone, or whatever. Shudder is, they just cater to horror movie fans, so it's nothing but horror flicks from all different decades. They got a lot of international stuff, really killer, and I think it's like $5 a month or something like that. So just skip buying, a latte every now and then, and you can afford Shudder. It's great. Another one I've really been impressed by is Amazon Prime. If anybody in your household has Amazon Prime, you can have access to Amazon Prime Video, which has all kinds of great stuff up for streaming. Particularly a lot of really fun horror movies and stuff, so you can watch all kinds of good stuff on Amazon Prime if you have a membership. I'd also like to drop a reminder that if you are a fan of horror movies, I recommend you check out my weekly horror movie review podcast, which is called Dead and Lovely. On that show, which you can get for free over on iTunes or on SoundCloud, We review a different horror movie from all different decades and stuff every single week, so be sure to scope that out. Okay, this next question is a really, really good one. It's from Pete TSD. He asks, is 3 notes per string the only way to go for scales? So you guys probably already know 3 note per string scale patterns are really common for guitar players. You can do 3 note per string major scales, minor scales, all the modes, all that kind of jazz. As the name implies, there's 3 notes on every string with those patterns, which is really great because you end up covering a lot of range sonically, and there's a predictable amount of notes on every string. So everything will be 3 notes, 3 notes, 3 notes, 3 notes, 3 notes, 3 notes, like that. Because there's the same number of notes on every string, it means it's really easy to make up a cool sequence and then play that across every string in the scale pattern, like this. That's kind of bread and butter stuff for shred dudes like Paul Gilbert. I use that kind of stuff all the time too. So yeah, 3 note per string scales are fantastic, and that was pretty much all that I used for a really long time with my playing, until I started hitting limitations. The problem with big old 6-string 3 note per string scale patterns is that they're huge. So if I'm trying to play over some really tight, like jazzy chord changes where I'm changing keys, with every chord that goes by, and I'm trying to think about this big block for F major, and I'm trying to think about, this big block for B Phrygian, and this big block for G major, and this big block for D minor, it can be really cumbersome just trying to load up in my mind and on the fingerboard these gigantic scale patterns that are covering a ton of the neck at a time. The comparison I use all the time whenever you're talking about trying to use big 6-string, 3 note per string scale patterns while playing over chord changes that change keys and stuff like crazy is it's kind of like trying to fight in an elevator with like a broadsword. You know what I mean? It's like you can't even maneuver the thing because it's so huge. So what I recommend is that you learn even some small 1-octave scale patterns for every scale that you know. That way you can be a whole lot more maneuverable. It's not like using a broadsword in an elevator. It's like using a switchblade knife or something. I recommend learning at least 3 or 4 different ways to play every scale that you know. Let me demonstrate. I'm going to show you a handful of different ways to play a G major scale that I think every guitar player should know. Let's start with the 3 note per string G major scale. Now a G major scale is G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. So that's important information to know. All the different patterns we're going to show you here are going to be going through those 7 notes. So a 3 note per string G scale will go like this. I'll just call out fret numbers here from the low E. 3, 5, 7, A string 3, 5, 7, D string 4, 5, 7, G string 4, 5, 7, B string 5, 7, 8, high E string 5, 7, 8. So again, you can get some really mad mileage out of that because it's just such a huge scale pattern. I also recommend what we call a standard form scale pattern for that too, one where we just kind of sit in one position rather than kind of glide across the neck like you do with a 3 note per string. So that same scale, we could play it like this: 3, 5, 2, 3, 5, 2, 4, 5, 2, 4, 5, 3, 5, 2, 3. Again, that's a little bit more compact scale pattern than this huge sprawling 3 note per string thing. That can be handy to whip out at a moment's notice. What I really recommend doing with that one too is learning just that first octave of the scale as a handy 1-octave little miniature, switchblade scale pattern like this: 3, 5, 2, 3, 5, 2, 4, 5. What I want you to understand is that you could take that little 1-octave pattern and play that exact same pattern from another G on the neck. Like let's say the 10th fret A string. That right there is a G note, so I can attach that same little switchblade scale pattern right there and have the exact same notes as I had right here. Now, that's going to kind of change depending on which string set you're on, so I really recommend that what you do is you find the G note on every string and learn how to play that scale pattern from there. It would look something like this. That was from the 3rd E. This is from 10th A. This is from 5th D. Notice how the shape changed right there. This is from 12th G. That looks a whole lot different just because of the stupid tuning that we use on the guitar. But learn how to play that scale from any string that you can. That was from the 8th fret B. And I also really recommend that you learn how to play that G scale or any other scale laterally, going across a single string like this. Check this out. I'll start from the open G, and then I'll play 2, 4, 5, 7, 9, 11, 12. Learning scales across one string is ridiculously important, because whenever you're playing the scale like this and you're traveling across the strings, it can be kind of hard to tell how far apart the notes of it are. But what I really want you to concentrate on, kind of in layman's terms here, is the distances in between those notes. Like how when we played it this way, how the first and second notes were a step apart. How the second and third notes are a step apart. How the third and fourth are a half step apart. Fourth and fifth are a step. Fifth and sixth are a step. 6 and 7 are a step. And then note number 7 back to note number 1 is just a half step. That kind of thing right there is hyper ultra important to learn. So the cool thing is if you have one huge scale pattern for G, and you have this one, and you have your little 1 octave patterns everywhere, and you have your 1 string scale pattern, you can really get around like crazy. Like I could be starting off in that standard form one, right? And then when I get to the G string, I just switch into thinking about, oh, that 1 string G scale I know. Now that I'm here, I can be thinking about that 10th fret A string switchblade pattern that I know, right? That one right there, and descend back down that. So I could have something like this, starting off in standard form, switch into 1 string, descending down a switchblade pattern like that. And you can cover huge amounts of turf on the neck just thinking about a couple of small scale patterns like that. See, a lot of my students know that I have a huge gripe with how guitar players learn scale patterns because they pretty much always start off on the low E string. So if whenever you're thinking about a G scale, you're always thinking about, the key of fret number 3, then all that you'll ever learn is where to find a G on the low E string. But if you're using these smaller scale patterns and learning that there's a G here and a G here and a G here and all that kind of stuff, then you're really going to learn the entire neck super well instead of being like the average guitar player that only knows the E string. So I guess to sum it all up, yeah, I would say that 3-note per string stuff is great for applications where you want to cover a really long range of space or doing, sequence licks, or especially legato stuff, since there's a lot of room for hammer-ons and pull-offs when you're doing 3 notes on every string. But it's not the be-all, end-all. Learning how to play those same scales in a variety of other ways can unlock new areas of the fretboard that you wouldn't cover if you only stick to 3-note per string scales. Before we wrap up, I want to cover one more quick question from the Atari Creep. He says, before my question, a little fact. I was in Extreme's original Mama Don't Want to Go to School video. It was shot at my now torn down junior high school. That's pretty sick, dude. Question. Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo? There is a wrong answer, and you will get neutered. So here's the fun fact. I've never owned a Sega system of any kind. I had friends that had Genesis and 32X and all that kind of stuff back in the day, but I was always a Nintendo dude growing up in the 80s and 90s. The number of hours I spent playing Mario Kart and Mega Man X and Yoshi's Island and all those other great classic Super Nintendo games, I cannot even begin to imagine how much time I spent playing a Super Nintendo when I was a kid. So Super Nintendo all the way. So there you go, guys, another episode of Fact You Down the Tubes. Be sure to drop me a comment and let me know what other questions you guys would like to see answered on next month's installment. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel, and also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Ben Eller Guitars. Follow my Facebook fan page over on facebook.com/Uncle Ben Eller. And if you want to book some one-on-one Skype lessons with me, be sure to drop me an email, benellerguitars@gmail.com. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for a new episode of Fact You next month. Cheers.